the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
Hey, this is Marisol James, and you're tuning into Business Story of the Week.
Fantastic. And that is the lovely Marisol James. She's going to be our guest for today, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, my name is Joshua. I am your host. And every day, every episode, every week, we ask you guys a question to start off the show. And today's question is, what makes a love story truly unforgettable? And I believe Marisol is the perfect guest to answer that question for us. Marisol James was raised in a small town in Canada, is a small town girl at heart. She's a cancer survivor, a cinnamon bun lover, and a hardcore caffeine addict. I love that. I love that's a mouthful, but it's very, very important to put together. To date, Marisol has published 30, ladies and gentlemen. 30 and the 31st just came out. We're going to talk about that today. But Marisol has published 30 steamy, sexy, slinky, contemporary romances spread over 6 different series, including the best-selling Unseen Enemy, Dangerous Curves. We're going to talk a lot all about that. The Road Devil series as well. Her books incorporate action and adventure, suspense, military elements, and some surprising plot twists and turns. Over her 52 years, she has traveled extensively and all alone. Cambodia, India remain two of her favorite destinations. And she has started her life from absolutely zero, far, far more than once. Despite this, she remains an optimist and a hopeless romantic, of course, reflected in all the books that she's written. And Marisol is going to share that energy and all that love and that romance with us today. Marisol, thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing?
Good, Joshua. How are you doing? Thank you for having me. I'm
I
happy
am.
to be here.
I Yes, I understand that. We the last time didn't work, but I'm glad that you were very understanding about that. We did it again. I'm excited actually. I want this one was particularly on my calendar. I want to talk to you. Very, very interesting. A story that you have, Marisol. I like to start from the beginning. I mean, we love stories on here. It's literally the second name of the show, right?
Right.
But you are a master of stories, Marisol. But I want to start from the origin stories. What was the young Marisol James like? Was she always into romance? How did she see romance? What would the young Marisol say to the Marisol of today?
Well, it's kind of interesting because the young Marisol wanted to be a writer, but she wanted to be a contemporary writer, not a romance writer. I never read a romance. Um, Even when I wrote a romance, I had never read one. So, although I
Mhm.
was a romantic in that I really believed in human stories and I believed in relationships, I actually didn't read romance. I didn't watch soap operas. So, when I thought about being a writer, I wanted to be more like I'm Canadian. So, my role model was Margaret Atwood. I wanted to be like Margaret Atwood and write more
Mhm.
serious contemporary literature. So I think young Marisol would say to me now, she would say, "What happened to being Margaret Atwood? How did you end up so far from how did you get into the sexy steamy romance? What happened to you?" So I
Mhm.
think she'd be quite surprised.
Wow. Okay. First of all, that is quite funny. If you're, where's Margaret Atwood now? Where's all the inspiration? But this path of yours is also the path that you found for yourself. It might be surprising, but I feel like the young Marisol would have been also like, okay, I may have seen some signs along the way. But Marisol, talk to us about that pivot. Talk to us what led you down the path of contemporary romance. But more than that, actually, since we're on the topic of origin stories,
Hmm.
writer. being a writer, writing books, for you, where did that begin? Do you feel like you've always had that knack for writing? And why
Always.
contemporary romance eventually?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. When I was very young, I mean, I've always been a
Wow.
reader. Let's put it that way. I've always been a reader. And I
Hmm.
think that it's very
Hmm.
hard to be a writer unless you're a reader. I think the two have
Yeah,
to
of
go
course.
hand in hand.
I agree.
So, yeah. So I always loved to read, and then I always loved to write. And at school, I always found writing assignments ridiculously easy and fun and expressive. Other kids in the class were struggling with the writing, and
Hmm.
I could just do it. I mean, some kids could do
Right.
math, some kids could play instruments, some kids could do sports. I could write, just always. And
Right.
then when I
Wow.
was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I lived
Hmm.
in the hospital for 3 years. And
Right.
part of what I was able to do, even with the chemotherapy and the surgery, I could still lie
Hmm.
in bed and read. And I was encouraged to write. I was encouraged to
Wow.
almost like a diary to help process what I
Right.
was going through. So at that
Hmm.
point, between the ages of 9 and 12, writing became a way to process what was happening to me. Because, of course, I was a child
Interesting.
living in the hospital. My
Of
parents
course.
couldn't be around as much. I had two younger siblings at home. My father
Wow.
was working.
Wow.
So writing
Hmm.
became an outlet, an expression for me.
Uh-huh.
And that was when I
Hmm.
really thought I really want to be a writer. But
Wow.
back then, this was like 1982,
Hmm.
if you didn't have an
Hmm.
agent, there was no way to make a living in writing. Self-publishing with Amazon especially changed everything for people like me. So I was not encouraged by my family to pursue a writing career. I was encouraged to pursue business, management, academia,
Of
law.
course.
So I ended up getting my master's degree in international law and
Hmm.
living all over the world working in management. And so that was how I
Yeah.
got into a really strong business professional background. I
Hmm.
managed
Hmm.
schools in Guangzhou, China. I managed schools in Hong Kong. I moved to
Hmm.
Warsaw and I got into publishing, but as an editor in chief,
Wow.
and then as the
Right.
chief operational director for Central and Eastern Europe for a publishing house. So
Wow.
everything was business, business, business management. So
Wow.
I lost sort of this motivation to write. But when I was living in Poland and I was the chief operational director, I was writing
Wow.
for fun, just as a way to sort of express myself and have some fun. But I was
Yes.
writing quite heavy contemporary literature and like really
Hmm.
dark and noir with a supernatural element to it, which
Hmm.
I loved. But when I self-published it on Amazon, because by this point
Yes.
Amazon was allowing self-publishing, people who read
Hmm.
it, like professional reviewers, were reading my books and loving them, but
Hmm.
nobody was buying them. So it was just something I did for myself. But
Right.
then I got diagnosed with cancer a second time, and I was
Mhm.
immediately fired from my chief
Oh
operational
my
director
goodness.
job.
No. Oh, come
Yeah,
on.
I lost my job. So there I
Wow.
was.
Wow.
I was married. I had two small children. I had lost my job.
Mhm.
This whole sort of
Mhm.
years of working in business and management that had led to this really high level management position, and it was just gone.
Mhm.
So I had two friends who were also sort of writing for fun, and when I told them what was going
Right.
on, they said, "Well," I said, "Well, I'm on my back. I'm doing chemo. I don't have a job. I don't know what to do." And they said, it was their idea. They said, "Why don't you write the exact opposite of everything you've ever written?" So all my business proposals and my law stuff, and then my heavy contemporary literature, they said, "Why don't you write romance? Because that is just the
Wow.
exact opposite of who you are and how you've been educated and the work you've
Mhm.
done." And I said to them, "I've never read a romance. I've never watched a romance. I wouldn't
Wow.
know where to begin with a romance."
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the three
Hmm.
of us basically just said, okay, what are we going to do? Just it's fun. Like nothing's going to come of
Okay.
this. It's a way for you
Right.
to take your mind off what's going on and regroup a little bit.
Hmm.
So I didn't take it
Hmm.
seriously. So we basically decided that I would write a sexy cowboy romance. I called it Open
Uh-huh.
Skies, and it
Right.
was just, we laughed the whole way through it. I wrote it in 2 weeks. I wrote it beginning to end in 2 weeks. And I
What?
just, yeah. And I just laughed the whole way through it. And my friends just really were encouraging me, you know? And when it was done, I said, okay, well, that's done. That was fun. It brightened
Hmm.
my mood. And they said, well, you have experience self publishing on Amazon. Why don't you self publish it? And I said, no, it was
Hmm.
never meant to be published.
Right.
It was just a way for me to take a break from my life. And they said, come on, go on, publish it, publish it. So I did. I self published it and I
Wow.
forgot about it. And suddenly royalties were landing in my bank account within a couple of
Wow.
months. And I'm
Wow.
thinking, what on earth? Like, I thought, did somebody finally find my contemporary literature that's getting all these great
Uh-huh.
reviews? No,
Hmm.
no, it was the Open Skies. I had sold thousands of these things.
Fascinating. Uh-huh.
And I don't know
Wow.
how. I don't know where these people came from. I certainly didn't
Hmm.
promote it. I didn't, the next thing I
Wow.
knew, I had all this money coming into my bank account. So then I told my friends and they said, well, quickly, quickly get onto social media, like at least put up a Facebook page because people are going
Hmm.
to be
Hmm.
looking for you. And I said, okay,
Yes.
fine. So I started a
All
Facebook
right.
page and suddenly people were finding me there and saying, where's the next book? Where's the next book? And I'm
Wow.
thinking,
Wow.
there is no next book. I wrote this thing in 2 weeks,
Right.
but
Uh-huh.
I still had nothing else to do except sort of lie around and be sick. So I wrote a second book and it also became a bestseller. They were both bestsellers. So this continued on. And then once I went into remission from cancer, I thought to
Hmm.
myself, well, I need to go find another management job. I can get back to
Right.
what I was doing all this time.
Hmm.
But I thought about it and I looked at the royalties and I looked at how much fun I was having writing
Right.
romance,
Right.
which I never saw
Hmm.
coming. And I thought, you know what?
Hmm.
Why am I looking for a new job? Like why am I trying to go back into management, I
Hmm.
never loved it. It was okay. I never really enjoyed it personally, but I loved
Hmm.
writing. And it just felt like somehow I had ended up in writing, not at all the way I planned or thought,
Hmm.
or when I was
Hmm.
young, thought the kind of writer I would be, but I just fell
Right.
into it. I landed in it by accident. And so when it came
Hmm.
time to make a decision, do I go back to management or do I carry on doing this thing that was a fluke in my life? I chose the fluke.
Right.
And so I've been writing romance now for it's going on 10 years. And so that's why I have 31 books.
That's it. I was going to say 31 books later, with
Yeah.
just like it seems, which you call it a fluke, but there must have been some sense of fate in there. They say that luck is a meeting of preparation and luck, and opportunity is a meeting of preparation and luck. And I feel like you just hit that balance in there where you just put this out there and then you the world received it, the universe received it, and people loved it, and it
Yeah.
fell into your lap, and it felt like it was the universe saying, telling you that you do what you love to do, do
Hmm.
this, keep doing it, and 31 books later you are still writing it. It's a fascinating story. It's almost
Thank
like
you.
you've rediscovered your romance, your own romance with writing, and it's reinvigorated your life. Marisol, before I really want to, of course, touch back into the book career that you've had, we've had a lot. We're going to have a lot to talk about there. But you mentioned your experience prior to this in business management. You talked about,
Hmm.
you know, um, all these different locations where you've worked, and of course, the horrible experience you've had where you were fired after being diagnosed. Just imagine. But talk to me about the differences or the similarities at all, where you felt like your career as a writer fell into your lap. You felt like it was a fluke or it was luck, but
Mm.
you must be a good writer as well for that to happen. On the other end of it is like you've had this all this business experience as well. How do you feel like the lessons that you gotten from that business management experience, how do you feel it has transitioned well into your career as a writer?
That's a good question. I've never been asked that before. And I'm glad you've asked because it's something that I am eternally grateful for having as a background. Because when
Mhm.
you get into business, especially at the management level, especially when you're
Yeah,
responsible for a team of people, and I would be
right.
responsible over the years, anything a team of 6 to a team of
Of course.
66. My teams were huge,
Yes.
depending where I was or and what I was doing.
Mm.
So I've always felt as a manager that
Mhm.
um, you have to lead by example. And it's really important that the buck stops with you. So I
Right.
didn't accept a lot of excuses from my staff. You know, there were legitimate excuses, and then there were just excuses. And I didn't accept
Of
them in
course.
myself either. So
Mhm.
feel like with my writing, because I work for myself now, it's just me and I do everything myself. The buck stops with me. So if I write something and it's not good enough. I have to
Right.
have the courage to say, this is not good enough. I can do better. No excuses. Delete it. Start again. Just do it again, you
Okay.
know? So that's
Okay.
really important. But also, the whole thing was I did work in schools for a long time in education. And then I got into
Yes.
publishing. I got into being an editor in chief. And that, of all of my management jobs, was my favorite because I was working with people who understood visuals because I
Mhm.
can't do these things. I know what I want in a
Yes.
cover or I know what I want
Right.
in a social media ad or whatever. I can't always produce it myself. So
Right.
I really learned to appreciate the skills and abilities of other people, things that were beyond me. So you learn how to outsource and you learn how to find
Yes.
people that share your vision, have your
Mhm.
same work ethic, have the same end
Yes.
goal in mind.
Mhm.
This person handles the sales, and this person handles the magazine layout, and this person designs the covers,
Right.
and here's my photographer, and here are my staff writers. And you just learn to appreciate everybody's abilities that you don't have. So when I work with people on things like my website, I am very open and appreciative of what they bring to the table that I cannot. And it
Mhm.
makes working with other people so enjoyable. And I think so many managers get into this thing where I have to know everything. And if you know more than me, I'm threatened. I have never felt that way. And I think to feel that way is to weaken your team overall because you don't get the best
Of
out of
course.
people if you're threatened by them.
Of course.
And also, working for myself now, like I set the deadlines, I set the schedules, I set the budget, I set the
Mhm.
timeline, I do the social media, I talk to people and work with them. And it's
Everything.
just decision after decision after decision. And as a
Of course.
manager, I'm very comfortable standing by my decisions. So all of these
Wow.
things have been brought into this self-published, self-employed, self-motivated work that I do now. And it's a very strong background in terms of how I work now, and I'm very
Mhm.
comfortable with it. There felt like there was no learning curve with it
Wow.
whatsoever.
That is fascinating. I mean, I feel like that also speaks a lot to the success you've had as an author, as a self-published author,
Mm,
more importantly, too, because it's a different kind of animal, also a different kind of challenge to self-publish, let alone self-manage everything. And I
yeah.
love that you said like it felt like there was no learning curve. It was natural. It felt natural for you to transition into that. And I feel like I said, I feel like that is a big reason right now why you have written 31 books to date, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
To
The
date. Yes.
31st book just came out. We want to talk about that one, Marisol. The 31st
Okay.
book that just came out 2 weeks ago. Talk to us about that one. What is the title, and what was the inspiration about this one? And but more importantly, this one I just realized, what is the drive? Why keep writing? I mean, this is a 31st book. Do you see yourself ever slowing down?
No, never. I mean, I'm
Wow.
52 years old now. I'm 52. I Writing is one of those jobs that you can do forever. I mean, if I could
Mhm.
write a book flat on my back between the ages of 9 and 11, and I could write a book flat on my back, having cancer a second time, I can certainly keep
Mhm.
writing. I can write no matter what, no matter where. As long as
Right.
I'm able
Mhm.
to put a storyline together, I can write. I see no
Yes.
expiration date on being an author at all. But in terms of my series, it's interesting because, like I said, my first series was a sexy cowboy series where I created
Yes.
this fictional ranch hotel at the foot of the Rockies. It's called
Yeah.
Open Skies Ranch, and the name of the series is also Open Skies. When I got tired of the sexy cowboys, I started an MMA series about a couple of
Mhm.
guys who owned a gym. And I tied Open Skies into that series because
Oh.
when
Oh.
one of my heroes from the MMA series, which is called Fighting for Love, he went to
Right.
school with the hero of the first Open Skies book, My Sexy Cowboy. So there was that relationship tie, but
Wow.
also when one of my characters in the Fighting for Love series needed a place to go and heal from something, her
Okay.
boyfriend took her to Open Skies Ranch for the peace and the quiet and the tranquility. So that was when I started just linking my series together. And then
Wow.
I realized how much my readers loved that. They just loved
Mhm.
reading a series, the Fighting for Love series, and suddenly someone
Mhm.
from Open Skies would just pop up in the storyline
Right.
somewhere. Not as
Uh-huh.
anything major, but almost like a little
Right.
cameo. And they said to me, "Oh
Right.
God, it was so good to see Jake again. It was so good to see Julie again." So that was when I thought, well, that's something to remember. So, as my series progressed, and I wrote Unseen Enemy, and then I wrote Dangerous Curves, and there's a lot of strong links between those two series. In fact,
Right.
they're the characters are they spent as much time in the other series as they do in their own. And
Right.
there was this group of motorcycle club guys who would come to Dangerous
Oh.
Curves, which is this dive bar. It's called Dangerous
Uh-huh.
Curves, the series, but it's also the name of the setting where a lot of stuff takes
Right.
place. And it's kind of
Mhm.
a dive bar that attracts a really rough element, a lot of
Mhm.
ex-cons, a lot of
Mhm.
criminals, a lot of motorcycle club members. And
Mhm.
these motorcycle club guys were kind of in and out of Dangerous Curves bar. They would show up,
Yes.
something would
Mhm.
happen, they would leave. And I found myself becoming interested in these guys. They were
Mhm.
very much background characters, but they seemed interesting to me as just a
Right.
group of
Mhm.
men. So when it came time, I finished writing Dangerous Curves and I finished writing Unseen Enemy, and it was time for a new series. I kind of had a choice to go one of two ways, and I
Mhm.
went both directions. But the
Right.
Motorcycle Club series interested me more on a personal level. And I don't know
Right.
why. I think it's because I've never, again, watched a motorcycle club show. I've never really been in MC movies, and it just felt like I wasn't constrained by any
Right.
expectations, even on
Okay.
myself,
That makes
because I
sense.
had none.
Yes. Yes.
So I could just say, well, I'll just write an MC series. And what was
Right.
interesting about the series is that I
Mhm.
decided to start it from a different place. Like most of these series, I have read a few MC series, and these guys are
Okay.
all hardcore one percenters in the criminal life,
Mhm.
full on sort of bad guys that you root for. But I went the
Mhm.
opposite way, completely opposite. I decided
Okay.
to write it from the perspective of an MC club or motorcycle club that
Okay.
had been in the one percenter lifestyle. They had been
Mhm.
drug runners, they had been gun runners, they had been kind of murderers for hire, but they came under new presidency, and this guy pulled them out of the life a year before my first
Right.
book starts. So they've spent a
Hmm.
year trying to go straight, trying to be law abiding citizens, trying to get
Yes.
out of that dark, horrible, seedy sort of lifestyle.
Yes.
But the
Uh-huh.
problem, I think anybody who's had a criminal background or a really bad background, even when they try to do the right thing, it's very hard to do the right thing. That old life keeps trying to drag you back in. So for me, the tension point in this series isn't that these guys are one
Hmm.
percenters. It's that they're trying really
Hmm.
hard not to be one percenters and nobody will let them out of the life. So they
Hmm.
keep being put in situations that they're really trying so hard not to be in. And for me, that's the interesting part of the series is the bigger question is if you're really determined to be a good person leading a good life that
Hmm.
nobody wants you to, what happens?
Right. Right. Oh, man, Marisol, I can listen to you all day. I feel like I'm already reading one of your story. I'm already reading one of your books. I mean, I was already getting lost in that concept that you're talking about. I mean, first of all, you're talking about putting and tying together your books now. It's almost like what's popular storytelling right now is like multiverse, right? Like it's multiversal,
Yes.
connecting all the dots. Is like you have your own Marvel universe, your own contemporary romance universe, and I think that is so cool and that is so interesting too. But what really stood out to me is I feel like you're giving yourself permission to write these things that you haven't experienced yourself, but in a way you begin to experience them in your own way, in your own imagination. But
Yeah.
having not experienced them allows you to put it out there in a way that is unbridled, where you're not holding back, and you're not limited to these other ideas because you've never experienced them. I think that is a fascinating approach to writing, and it clearly speaks a lot about, again, first off, the number of books that you have written today. And Marisol, I am very, very, very. I think it's very cool that what you are doing, and of course, you mentioned a little bit about that motorcycle book series as well. It's a series. A fourth one is coming out soon. When is
The
that
fifth
coming
one
out?
is
Let
coming
our
out
audience.
soon.
A fifth one is coming out soon. So
Yes.
four is out. A fifth one is coming out soon.
Yes.
First of all, before we truly get lost in this again, where can we find all those books, and where can we learn more about the upcoming books that you have?
The best place to find me always is through my website, which is
Mhm.
marisoljames.com. Once you're there,
Yes.
you can click on my book series. The drop down menu will come down, and I've got 6 separate series. So click on the one you're
Mhm.
interested. So there's sexy cowboys, there's MMA fighters, there's ex-military guys, there's dive bar, there's motorcycle club. And there's one book in a series that I still have to continue on, and it's based around a self-help group for men who have come back
Right.
from war, seriously injured, missing
Mhm.
limbs or severely burned, and they're trying to
Wow.
have healthy relationships after
Wow.
this
Very cool.
horrible life-changing thing that's happened to them. So that's a sixth
Wow.
series. There's only one book in it right now. There will be more to come. Um, but then also on my website, there's a contact me section where you can find my
Mhm.
social media. You can email me or you can sign up to my newsletter. And it's a monthly
Right.
newsletter that I've just started up. And there will be sneak peeks of upcoming books, competitions, cover reveals, opportunities to enter other contests with other writers, this kind of thing. So
Yes.
if you're interested
Okay.
in a chance to win a book or you're interested in getting a little sneak peek of something I'm working on, the newsletter's the best place. Otherwise,
Okay.
everything's on social media. Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Marisol, first of all, that previous answer that you had, I just want to highlight that because you said, like, today, I think one of the biggest tropes right now is that the the protagonist is also a villain in a way that such a bad person, like it. I think it started with Walter White and Breaking Bad, and
Yeah,
then
the
you know
anti-hero.
uh,
Yeah. The
exactly
anti-hero. Yes.
the anti-hero, and they're just
Yeah.
bad, horrible people. But I love how you said that you deviated from this. You're writing about good people who wants to be good people. I think that angle is refreshing. I think it's so easy to write about bad villains. It's easy to write anti-heroes, and because it's human to be to do those things, and it will always find something to empathize about, but it's harder. I feel it takes a lot of more courage and strength to constantly be good, constantly be kind, and constantly be strong, which I feel the way you talk about your characters is one that you make it your goal to embody. Marisol, as a final wrap up to this
Mhm.
interview, which I have loved so far, by the way, I could listen to you all day. This one is a more personal anecdote, a more personal side. How has your diagnosis and surviving cancer, how do you think it influenced the themes in your love stories, in your romance stories? Is there any part of the resilience that you learned, or perhaps the patience that you learned throughout all this? Are there any traits that you take from your experience of surviving cancer that you feel has influenced the way you write your romance stories?
Another really good question I've never been asked before. Joshua, you're very good at this. I think you
Thank you
found your
so much.
calling with doing interviews. That's actually a really great question, and I've never thought about it. Okay, the simplest answer I'll
Please.
give
Hmm.
first, and then I'll expand. I did write a character with cancer, and this is not a
Hmm.
spoiler alert at all. The first book
Hmm.
of my Unseen Enemy series is about a
Right.
woman named Emma who's diagnosed with cancer, and her battle with cancer is actually carried through sort of all 8 of the books. So it's not like the
Yes.
first book, she's diagnosed and everything's fine. By the end of the book, yay, because that's not how cancer
Yes.
goes. That's not how any serious
Hmm.
illness goes. And I was really
Hmm.
resistant to make it look like a cakewalk because
Right.
cancer is hard. It's hard on you and it's hard on your loved ones and the people around you. And it took me
Of course.
time to really explore that. It took 4 or 5
Hmm.
books before that was really properly explored.
Hmm.
So in terms of being a cancer survivor, I feel that I gave, and oddly in a romance, I gave a really accurate and honest, even harsh portrayal of cancer, what it's
Wow.
really like to have cancer, to love someone with cancer, to be in a
Hmm.
relationship with someone with cancer. And I feel that that was kind of this searing honesty I had to bring to what it's like
Right.
to live with the disease. So in that way, I
Hmm.
would say my background really came through strongly, in that I was not going to treat this like a common cold. It's a serious
Yes.
disease and it goes on for a while.
Mhm.
Now, in terms of kind of the resilience aspect of it, I write all of my characters pretty much have been damaged to some extent, because I think as
Right.
people, we're all damaged. We all come with baggage. It's find me
Yes.
someone who has no baggage, right? And I'll
Of
find you
course.
someone who's literally never left the house or talked to another human being, right? Like it
Hmm.
doesn't make any sense.
Of course.
Depending on my character's background, there's more or less in terms of coming into a relationship more or less open, more or less trusting, more or less willing to let somebody else in. And so, for
Yes.
example, my characters who have left a war zone, damaged from that
Hmm.
physically or mentally or
Hmm.
emotionally, and then return to the
Hmm.
United States and then try to enter a relationship, it's hard for
Hmm.
them to do that.
Of
But
course.
there's
Hmm.
this resilience, there's this belief that they're deserving of love and they're a good
Yes.
partner to have in a relationship. And so take a lot of time developing my characters to make them people with damage, but open and resilient, and still believing they're deserving of a better life, a healthier life, a happy relationship. And this is really important to me, because no matter where they
Hmm.
come from or what they do, like even my motorcycle club guys who a year before my first book began, these were bad guys, but they've worked really hard to become better people. And they are deserving of healthy, loving relationships. And for a lot of them, this is a new experience to be in a relationship with someone where they're not running off to run guns. They're not running off to go kill someone. You know, they're trying really hard to have the normal relationship. And it's not easy for them. And so it's not easy for the person they're in the relationship with. So I really find, for me, the fascinating part of being a writer is I get to take these people who have these wildly differing backgrounds from each other and me as well, for the most part, and put them in healthy relationships and say, okay, now what? Like, how are you going to handle this? Because this is all new for you. This is terrifying for you. Um, and it's such a great examination or study of human nature, which is, I mean, heavy to say for a romance, but I make a point of writing romance that's not, I don't tie everything up in a bow by the end of the story. Things linger, things loom. There's a bigger picture going on in the background that's not fully played out until the whole series. And I trust the intelligence of my readers to know what's actually happening here. Nothing, it's not surface. And it's just really important to me that my characters are multifaceted, multidimensional, complicated, but at the end of the day, they are trying very hard to be a good partner to their person that they love. And I think that's a really important thing to get out there, because nobody's perfect, but we're all deserving of love and connection.
I love it, Marisol. Of course, again, like these stories, they're life. It's real life also in the way that you write them because you know when we talk about romance or love stories, often than not, it's like you know rainbows and like a happy ending.
Mm,
They live happily ever after. That's always the love story, right? But I
yeah.
think the better stories, the greater stories, the ones that really stick to you, are the ones that leave you in a sense of you choose how it ends in your mind. You don't always give that ending, or you don't always give the answers to the readers. Like you said, you trust their intelligence, you trust that they know what is happening, and that makes for a better story because it gives us that freedom to live that story in that book as well and interpret it in our own way. And again, this speaks a lot to your success. You are a fantastic writer, even though I haven't even read any of your books. The way you talk about them, it's just, it's just, it's just life. That's all how I can
Yeah.
describe it. It's just how it is, how life works. Um, Not perfect, not always good. A little bad in there, some reality in there, some hard things in there that we need to talk about. But at the same
Mm,
time, life is a romance, is it not? Wouldn't you say
mm.
so, Marisol? Again, to all our audience listeners out there, MarysolJames.com is the website. Marysol, she is also, of course, out there on all the socials. Her books is everywhere, if I'm not mistaken. Can we find it all on Amazon?
Only on Amazon. I'm exclusive to Amazon because I'm in the
So,
Kindle Unlimited program. So if any of your
oh, wow.
listeners are in KU, they can get my books through the KU program. And all my books are ebooks right now, but I am in the process of preparing all of them for print, like paper book. And once I have them
Wow.
up and running as print books, I will offer some signed copies up as prizes for a competition. So I'll be sending out
Wow.
some
Okay, that
signed
is so
copies
cool.
of my books. So if they want to get into my
Okay.
socials or they want to join my newsletter, that would be the best place to enter for the opportunity to get a signed book from me. So
All right. From
that's a couple
Marisol
months.
herself.
That's a couple months in the future still, because it's just
Of
quite a
course.
process to get books ready, especially 31
Yes.
books ready for print in the middle
It's
of
a lot.
writing my
But,
next book as well. So,
uh-huh.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, of course, you we trust you. Of course, we know that you're gonna make it happen. We're gonna wait for that book. To all our audience listeners out there, if any of this interests you, make sure to go check out Marisol's book. Grab a copy yourself and wait for those signed books from her as well. Make sure to go follow her, check her out on her website and her socials. Marisol, thank you so much for your time. I'm truly appreciative of this. Again, I could have listened to you for an entire hour and not ask you all the questions. It's been very lovely. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Joshua. And you've really come up with some really interesting questions that I haven't been asked before. So I appreciate it
Thank
because it gave me the chance to look at my own work a bit differently from a different perspective. So I appreciate that. Thank
Wow,
you. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Marisol. Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed this one. To all our audience and listeners out there, I hope you guys enjoyed this one too. Thank you for watching the episode, and we will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.